For 200 years, humanity had been a ghost story, a cautionary tale the Athelian hegemony told its young. We were the species locked behind the veil of soul, a shimmering, impenetrable quarantine field erected around our star system after a brief, disastrous first contact. The Athelians, a race of serene, psionically gifted beings who saw themselves as the galaxy's ordained shepherds, had judged us and found us wanting. They saw our art, our music, our passions, our furious, illogical, beautiful chaos, and they deemed it a contagion. To them, emotion was a primitive flaw, a chaotic variable in the perfect silent equation of the universe they sought to create. Their ships were marvels of crystalline geometry, their fleets coordinated across light years by a network of telepathic conduits, their actions governed by a cold, placid logic that was as absolute as it was terrifying. So they imprisoned us, not with malice, but with the detached pity of a gardener walling off a patch of intractable weeds. Inside our cage, we festered. Generations were born and died seeing the veil as their sky, a constant, shimmering reminder of our failure. We splintered, we fought, we rebuilt, and we never, ever forgot. Our technology evolved down a different path, a path of necessity and spite. It was not elegant. It was loud, greasy, and gloriously imperfect, a reflection of the species that birthed it. And on the fringes of this forgotten society lived the scrappers. I was a scrapper. My ship, the Junker Queen, was a testament to human ingenuity born from desperation. Her hull was a patchwork quilt of armor plating from decommissioned orbital stations and the scavenged husks of our own civil wars. Her engines sputtered and coughed like a dying man, and her cockpit smelled perpetually of ozone, stale coffee, and regret. But at her heart, she held a secret, a blasphemy of physics that was my inheritance and my curse, a prototype chaos drive. It didn't burn fuel in any traditional sense. It twisted the very fabric of probability, creating momentary, localized ripples in reality that allowed the ship to lurch through space in a way that defied conventional mechanics. It was unstable, unpredictable, and more likely to tear the ship apart than get you to your destination. But it had one singular advantage that made it worth the risk. Its energy signature was pure, unadulterated noise. To the Hegemony's psionic sensors, which perceived the universe as a symphony of ordered energies, the chaos drive was screaming, incoherent static. It was invisible. My name is Elias Thorne, and I flew the Queen into the veil's churning energies, hunting for the only resource worth a damn in our caged world, Athelian debris. Occasionally, one of their automated probes would miscalculate its approach to the barrier and shatter against it, showering the inner edge with fragments of their incomprehensible technology. I'd salvage those fragments, selling the raw materials to the clandestine resistance movements that clung to life in the hollowed-out asteroids of the Kuiper Belt. It wasn't noble work. It was grave robbing, but it paid the bills and kept the memory of my parents alive, their faces last seen in the flash of an Athelian sterilization probe that had misidentified their small mining outpost as a potential threat a decade ago. The day the universe changed started like any other. I was deep in the veil's corrosive energy field, its ethereal light playing across my cockpit, when a new star bloomed in the blackness. It was an Athelian census probe, a monolithic vessel the size of a small moon, its crystalline structure pulsing with soft, internal light. These behemoths appeared every 20 years or so, their arrival a cold reminder of our status as lab rats. The probe moved with an unnerving grace, a predator in its own private ocean. Its purpose to drift through our system, catalog our pathetic progress, and ensure the contagion was still safely contained. An act of supreme, cosmic arrogance. I watched it from the cover of a dense particle cloud, my hand hovering over the switch to kill all non-essential power. But then a signal, thin and desperate, cut through my comms. It was a tight beam transmission, heavily encrypted, originating from a known resistance listening post on Europa. It wasn't meant for me, but the Queen's cobbled-together comms array had a habit of catching whispers it shouldn't. The message was fragmented, panicked. Detected us. A full scan, psionic report transmitting. They know. I felt the blood drain from my face. Athelian probes didn't just see with sensors, they perceived with their psionic network. When the probe sent its report, it wouldn't travel at the speed of light. It would be instantaneous, a thought shared across the galaxy. The resistance base on Europa would be doomed before they could even finish their panic transmission. The Hegemony wouldn't even dispatch a fleet immediately. They would simply update their celestial map, placing a tiny sterile marker over Europa's coordinates, a target to be erased with cold efficiency at their leisure. I saw the probe, a mountain of silent, judgmental light, and I saw the ice-crusted surface of Europa in my mind's eye. Thousands of people, idealists, soldiers, families, all about to be annihilated because of a data packet. I could run. It was the smart thing to do, the logical thing. Disappear into the belt, sell my latest haul, and try to drink away the sound of their dying screams. That was the scrapper way. Survival above all. But then I saw my mother's face in the swirling nebulae of the veil, heard my father's laughter in the hum of the life support. The Athelians saw us as a mistake, an error, a line of corrupted code to be isolated and eventually deleted. Our passions, our fury, our ability to love so fiercely it broke our hearts, they saw it all as a weakness. They had never once considered it could be a weapon. An idea sparked in my mind, so insane, so utterly suicidal, that it felt like the only sane option left. I couldn't outrun a thought. I couldn't fight a ship the size of a city, but I didn't have to. I just had to fight the signal. I slammed my palm down on the activation panel for the Chaos Drive. The Junker Queen screamed in protest as the drive spooled up. The ship shuddered violently, the lights flickering as reality itself seemed to thin around the engine core. Through the viewport, the stars warped and smeared. I wasn't just flying anymore. I was falling sideways through the universe. I pushed the throttle forward, aiming not for Europa, not for escape, but straight for the census probe. My plan was simple in its madness. The probe's primary psionic antenna was a delicate, filigreed spire at its apex, a crystalline needle that broadcasted its findings back to the Hegemony's hive mind. If I could get close enough, if I could engage the Chaos Drive at full power right next to that antenna, maybe, just maybe, the raw, quantum noise of the drive would overwhelm the coherent, ordered psionic signal. I wouldn't be destroying the ship, but I might be able to deafen it, to blind it, to turn its report into meaningless gibberish. The probe's automated point defense systems, designed to stop kinetic threats like missiles or asteroids, completely ignored me. The Queen was a ghost in their machine, a paradox they couldn't perceive. I got closer, the sheer scale of the Athelian vessel filling my entire view. It was like flying towards a god. The intricate patterns on its hull shifted and flowed, and I felt a faint, tickling pressure at the edge of my mind, the passive hum of its psionic field, a serene, chilling presence that promised absolute order at the cost of everything that made me human. My teeth chattered, a primal, animal fear threatening to overwhelm me. This was it. I was a gnat about to fly into a hurricane. With a final, defiant roar, I opened the throttle all the way, pushing the Chaos Drive far beyond its safety limits. Alarms blared, red lights strobing across my face. The ship felt like it was being torn apart atom by atom. I closed my eyes, gripped the controls, and aimed for the glowing tip of the psionic spire. The impact never came. Instead, there was a wrenching, nauseating lurch as the Queen's reality-bending field slammed into the probe's psionic broadcast. For a split second, I felt it. I felt the Athelian network. It wasn't a sound or a sight, but a feeling of infinite, cold, interconnected minds, a galaxy-spanning consciousness of pure, emotionless logic. And then I felt their shock as my Chaos Drive ripped through it. A scream of pure, unfiltered static, a blast of quantum uncertainty into their perfect equation. The feedback loop was instantaneous, a wave of raw psionic energy, corrupted and amplified by my drive, washed back over my ship. The world dissolved into white light and a sound like a star breaking apart. Every system on the Junker Queen died at once. The comforting hum of the life support, the flicker of the screens, the roar of the drive, all gone. There was only silence, the blackness of space, and the terrifying, silent bulk of the Athelian probe hanging motionless beside me. It was blind, confused. Its crystalline hull flickered erratically, its internal light dimming as it struggled to process the nonsensical data that had just assaulted its very being. I had won, and it had cost me everything. As the darkness closed in around the edges of my vision, and my own breath began to fog the freezing cockpit glass, I saw a new light. A small, ugly, beautiful ship, clearly of human design, was approaching. It was scarred and armored, a Bulldog-class patrol craft, likely from the very base I had just saved. They must have tracked the unique, violent energy signature of my drive's final, desperate pulse. My last conscious thought was one of bitter irony. For my entire life, I had run from everything from the memory of my family, from any cause bigger than myself. And now, unconscious and bleeding in the shattered remains of my cockpit, I was being dragged, kicking and screaming, into the very heart of the rebellion. The ghost of Saul was about to learn how to howl. I awoke to the hiss of regulated air and the antiseptic smell of recycled oxygen, a scent so clean it felt like an assault. For a moment, I thought I was dead. The afterlife, apparently, was a sterile white room with a low, humming ceiling. A thinned gray blanket was tucked tightly around me, a restraint more psychological than physical. My head throbbed in time with a slow, rhythmic beep coming from a monitor beside my cot. A woman with tired eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun was checking the monitor. She wore the dark gray, utilitarian jumpsuit of the Europa Resistance, a stark contrast to the patched-together leathers I lived in. She noticed my eyes were open and gave me a curt nod, her expression unreadable. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Scrapper," she said, her voice raspy. "You've been out for 36 hours. Name's Anya. I'm the medic who scraped you out of that tin can you call a ship." I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness and a sharp pain in my ribs pushed me back down. My body felt like a bag of broken glass. "My ship," I croaked, my throat raw. "The Queen," Anya grunted, making a note on a datapad. Your queen is in the main hangar, or what's left of her. A tech team is practically worshipping the wreckage. You, on the other hand, had 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, and your core temperature was dropping into the permanent nap zone. You're lucky the patrol found you when they did. She paused, her gaze sharpening. You're also lucky Commander Rostova is more interested in how you did what you did than in throwing you in a brig for unauthorized use of a transponder-masked vessel near a secure facility. Before I could process that, the door to the med base slid open and another woman entered. This one carried herself with an air of authority that was unmistakable. She was tall, with a lean, wiry frame that spoke of a life spent in low gravity and high stress. Her black hair was cut short, practical, and a long, thin scar cut across her left eyebrow, giving her a permanently skeptical look. This had to be Commander Rostova. She dismissed Anya with a flick of her eyes and pulled a simple metal stool to my bedside. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Elias Thorne," she began, her voice a low, steady alto. "Born on the Ceres mining colony. Parents, Marcus and Lena Thorne. Declared deceased after the Ithilien sanitization incident 10 years ago. You've spent the last 8 years operating as an unregistered salvager in the Vale, selling scavenged materials on the black market. You have a reputation for being reliable, apolitical, and expensive. It wasn't a question. She was reading my life story off some unseen file. I stayed silent, my face a mask of indifference I had perfected over years of haggling with gangsters and warlords in the belt. She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes boring into me. "The question I have, Mr. Thorne, is how a back-alley scrapper with a ship that looks like it lost a fight with a trash compactor managed to do something my best strategists and physicists have only theorized about in hushed tones. I got lucky," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. My drive overloaded. It was a freak accident. Rostova's lips thinned into a line that wasn't quite a smile. A freak accident that just happened to occur at the precise nanosecond the Ithilien probe was initiating its psionic data burst. A freak accident that precisely targeted its primary communication spire. A freak accident that didn't just jam the signal, but corrupted it, turning it into a feedback loop of pure informational chaos. The probe isn't just silent. "Mr. Thorne," it's screaming. "We've been monitoring it. Anything that gets within 1,000 kilometers of it, Ithilien drones, listening posts, even other probes starts to malfunction. Its psionic field has become a virus. You didn't just hang up the phone on the Hegemony, you gave the operator a terminal illness." She stood up. "Get dressed. There's something you need to see." She tossed a fresh gray jumpsuit onto the cot. It felt alien against my skin, clean and uniform, the opposite of everything I was. I followed her through the corridors of the base, a labyrinth of rough-hewn ice and reinforced steel. This was Europa Prime, the heart of the human resistance. It was a city carved into the moon's icy mantle, hidden beneath a decoy geothermal plant. It was a place of whispers and shadows, a testament to the stubborn, weed-like persistence of the human spirit. We entered the main hangar bay, a cavernous space carved from the ice, so vast that my breath plumed in the cold air. And there, in the center of it all, was the Junker Queen. She looked even worse than I remembered. Her patchwork hull was blackened and scored, entire sections peeled back to reveal her tangled, greasy guts. A team of engineers in pristine white lab coats swarmed over her like ants, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Standing by the mangled engine housing was a young man with wild black hair and oil smudges on his cheek. his eyes wide with an almost religious fervor as he stared at a holographic projection of the Chaos Drive. "Commander," he said, not taking his eyes off the hologram. "It's magnificent. It violates at least 3 known laws of thermodynamics. It doesn't consume fuel. It seems to borrow energy from adjacent quantum realities. The instability isn't a flaw. It's the entire point. It's an engine that runs on pure, weaponized unpredictability." He finally looked at me, his eyes lighting up. "You're the pilot. How do you even navigate with it? The math is impossible." This was Gian, the tech priest Rostova had mentioned. I shrugged. "You don't navigate. You aim and pray. Mostly it just works." Gian looked like I had just handed him a holy text. Rostova placed a hand on my shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm, and steered me towards a large observation window that overlooked the hangar. "We can't replicate it," she said quietly. "Gian and his team have been trying since they towed your ship in. The drive core is a singularity of your own making, a jumble of scavenged Ethelian tech and human improvisation that is so unique, so specific to your ship and your intuitive piloting, that it's a dead end for us technologically." She turned to face me, her expression grim. "Which makes you, and that broken ship, the single most valuable asset in the solar system." My blood ran cold. I knew what was coming next. "I want my ship," I said flatly. "Fix it. Give me my cut for the intel I provided by accident, and I'll be on my way." Rostova shook her head slowly. "Your old life is over, Thorn. The moment you engaged that drive, you painted a target on your own back so large, the Ethelians will be able to see it from their home world. They will dissect what happened. They are logical, not stupid. They will eventually deduce that the contagion they so feared has developed a new symptom. They will send more than a census probe next time. They will send an extermination fleet, and they will start by looking for the source of the anomaly. They'll look for you." The weight of her words settled on me, a physical pressure in the cold air. She was right. The Hegemony was a vast, implacable machine. It would analyze the failure, identify the variables, and correct the error. I was the error. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked, the defiance in my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "To be your train monkey, to fly my ship into their fleets, and hope I get lucky again." Rostova pointed out the window, past the hangar, towards the star-dusted blackness of space. "We've spent a century hiding, fighting a shadow war of sabotage and data theft. We've been a nuisance. Nothing more. You've shown us a new way. You've shown us that their greatest strength, they're networked. Psionic consciousness is a vulnerability. We can't fight their ships. Not head on. But we can fight their minds." She brought up a holographic map of the inner solar system. A single point of light glowed with malevolent intensity near the orbit of Mercury. "This is Station Primus. It's not a military base in the traditional sense. It's a nexus, the central psionic relay for the entire Sol sector. Every Ethelian ship, every drone, every automated defense platform in this system is routed through that station. It's the brain, the central node of their local network." The sheer, suicidal audacity of her plan hit me like a physical blow. "You want me to fly into the most heavily defended point in the system and take out their main communications hub." "Not take it out," she corrected, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous, fanatical light. "Infect it. We get you close enough, just like you did with the probe. You engage the Chaos Drive, inject the virus of your engine's signature directly into their central nervous system. You won't just blind them, you'll drive them insane. The resulting system-wide cascade failure would give us months, maybe even years, to prepare for their response. It would be the single greatest blow ever struck against the hegemony. It would be the shot heard round the galaxy. I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. And what's to stop their defenses from vaporizing me the second I get within 1,000,000 kilometers? Your drive, Gian interjected, stepping forward eagerly. They can't see you. Their defenses are automated, networked through Primus. They're looking for threats they can comprehend. You are, for all intents and purposes, a ghost. I looked from Gian's fanatical optimism to Rostova's cold, calculated desperation. They were offering me a death sentence, gift-wrapped as a heroic mission. My every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to find a way out, to get back to the anonymity of the belt. But then I saw the Junker Queen again, my beautiful, broken home, a monument to a lifetime of running. I thought of my parents, their lives extinguished by a cold, logical decision made by a being who saw them as nothing more than a statistical anomaly. The Athelians had caged us, studied us, and dismissed us. They believed we were a chaotic, emotional mess. Maybe it was time to show them just how chaotic we could be. Fine, I heard myself say, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. I'll do it, but we do it my way. I'm not one of your soldiers. Commander, you will repair my ship better than she was before. And when I'm in that cockpit, I answer to no one. The Queen is my ship, and I am her only pilot. Rostova held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, a silent, binding contract passing between us. Welcome to the war, Mr. Thorn, she said. The ghost of Saul had just been handed a blade. The following weeks were a blur of welding sparks, diagnostic shrieks, and the constant, fervent chatter of Gian and his tech team. They treated the Junker Queen less like a ship and more like a holy relic. My grimy boy. Familiar cockpit was gutted and rewired, the cracked viewport replaced with reinforced plasteel, and the sputtering life support system swapped out for a military-grade unit that hummed with quiet efficiency. It felt wrong. Every new, clean component felt like a scar, a violation of the ship's chaotic soul. I spent most of my time in the hangar, supervising, arguing, and occasionally throwing a wrench to make a point. I was a ghost at my own ship's resurrection, a necessary but unwelcome presence among the engineers who spoke a language of quantum mechanics and energy capacitance that was mostly foreign to me. The new power conduits will increase the drive's output by 12%, Xiaojin would say, his eyes gleaming as he pointed to a schematic. It will tear the stabilizers to pieces. I'd counter, running a hand over a familiar dent in the hull. She needs to be able to drift, to slide. Your perfect lines and balanced outputs fight the chaos. The drive doesn't want efficiency bits. It wants a brawl. This was the crux of our disagreement. Gian saw the chaos drive as a complex equation to be solved and optimized. I saw it as a wild animal that had to be coaxed, not caged. He installed predictive targeting algorithms. I made him rip them out, explaining that you can't predict a course you don't even know you're going to take until the moment you take it. He wanted to soundproof the engine housing. I refused, telling him I needed to hear the pitch and groan of the drive, that it was the only warning I'd ever get before it tore a hole in reality and my ship at the wrong time. Commander Rostova would often observe these arguments from the hangar's control room, her face an impassive mask. She didn't care how we did it, only that it got done. To her, I was an unstable component in her grand machine, a pilot whose instincts were unnecessary, if irritating or variable. The only thing she and I agreed on was the urgency. Our long-range listening posts were picking up chatter. The Athelians were rerouting assets. The illness of the census probe had been noted, and the Hegemony was dispatching celestial physicians to investigate. We didn't have months. We had weeks, maybe a month at most. Finally, a compromise was reached. Jian, in a stroke of frustrated genius, designed what he called a resonance sink. It was a crude, brutal-looking device bolted directly onto the drive's primary manifold. For most of a flight, it would do nothing, allowing the drive's chaotic energy to bleed off naturally, letting me pilot by feel, the way I always had. But on my command, a series of magnetic containment fields would snap into place, focusing the drive's entire unpredictable output into a single blatant coherent lance of pure paradox for a few seconds. It was a shotgun shell being focused into a rifle slug. It would be horrifically unstable and would almost certainly slag the engine, but if it worked, it would be the infection Rostova wanted. The day of the mission arrived with a chilling lack of ceremony. There were no rousing speeches, no tearful goodbyes. War, for the resistance, was just another day's work. I stood in the briefing room with Rostova and a handful of grim-faced pilots. On the holographic map, our solar system was a web of Athelian control, with the glowing, cancerous heart of Station Primus near the sun. Operation Anvil will commence at 0400 hours, Rostova stated, her voice flat. She indicated a small squadron of ships on the far side of the system, near Jupiter. Captain Valerius and his team will launch a full-scale assault on the Athelian gas mining operations here. It will be loud, conventional, and bloody. They are to fight to the last ship. Their sole purpose is to draw the attention of the system's primary mobile fleet away from the sun. I looked at the faces of the pilots on the screen, their expressions stoic. They knew their role. They were the bait. They were the sacrifice. While the hegemony is occupied, Rostova continued, her gaze shifting to me, you will make your approach. The solar radiation near Mercury's orbit should provide sufficient cover for your final run. Once you are within range of Primus, you will engage the sink and inject the virus. Then you get out. Valerius's sacrifice will buy you 1 hour. No more. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This was no longer just about me and my ship. The lives of Valerius and his entire squadron were now just another resource being spent to get me to my target. The weight of their ghost was already settling on my shoulders. Climbing into the Junker Queen's cockpit felt different this time. The smell of ozone and stale coffee was still there, but it was mingled with the clean scent of new wiring. She was stronger, faster, more powerful, and yet she felt less like my own. She was a weapon now, not just a home. All systems nominal, Elias. Jian's voice crackled in my ear, his usual excitement tempered by a nervous tension. The sink is stable. Just try to bring her back in one piece. Both of you. No promises, kid, I muttered, my hands flying across the control panel in a dance of practiced muscle memory. I sealed the cockpit, took a deep breath, and engaged the chaos drive. The familiar gut-wrenching lurch was amplified, the ship groaning under the strain of its own upgraded power. Space didn't just bend, it shattered and reassembled around me. I was a phantom, a whisper in the void, rocketing towards the sun. For hours, I flew in silence, a knot of tension in my gut. The only sound was the thrum of the engine and my own breathing. Then, a series of faint, Distant flashes on my long-range sensors. Back in the direction of Jupiter, Operation Anvil had begun. I listened to the encrypted comms channel for a few moments, hearing the disciplined shouts of Captain Valerius calling out firing solutions, the roar of kinetic cannons, the sharp crackle of failing shields. Then, Rostova cut the feed. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. As I slipped past the orbit of Venus, I saw it. Station Primus. It wasn't a station in any human sense of the word. It was a living piece of geometry, a fractal of crystalline obsidian and captured starlight that hung in the corona of the sun, drinking in its power. It was silent, vast, and radiated a palpable sense of serene, unthinking superiority. The psionic hum I had felt from the probe was a whisper compared to this. This was a continuous, silent roar that pressed against the hull of my ship and the inside of my skull. It was the sound of a billion minds, perfectly ordered, perfectly aligned, and utterly devoid of anything I would call life. I pushed the Queen closer, hiding in the stellar flares and magnetic storms that raged around Mercury. The plan was working. The station was quiet. Its attention, and the attention of its fleet, directed light minutes away towards the sacrifice of Operation Anvil. They couldn't see me, but as I lined up for my final approach, something changed. A low-frequency vibration ran through the Queen's hull. The psionic pressure intensified, coalescing from a background hum into a focused, probing beam. They hadn't seen me. They had felt me. The virus I'd given the census probe hadn't just been a jamming signal. It had been a lesson. The Athelians were learning. Their perfect, logical system was adapting to the existence of an illogical threat. It couldn't see the ship, but it could sense the tiny ripples in space-time my drive left in its wake. It was hunting for the paradox. Suddenly, space around me warped. It wasn't a weapon firing. It was the universe itself being used as a weapon. A gravity well opened directly in my path, trying to crush the Queen. I swerved, the ship screaming in protest. The chaos drive fighting the unnatural physics. Waves of pure psionic energy washed over me, not designed to destroy, but to disorient, to instill a feeling of profound despair and futility. It was a voice in my head, a voice made of pure logic, whispering that my struggle was pointless, that my chaos was an error, that peace could be found in surrender. They weren't just attacking my ship anymore. They were attacking me, my humanity. My memories flashed before my eyes, my mother's smile, the roar of the crowd at a zero-G race, the taste of real whiskey. I gritted my teeth, shouting into the void of my cockpit. "You want chaos? I'll give you chaos." I opened the throttle, diving straight towards the station's central spire, a glowing needle of psionic energy. The gravity fields intensified, and the psionic assault became a mental battering ram. I was bleeding from the nose, every muscle in my body screaming. I was closer now, so close I could see the intricate, shifting patterns on the station's hull. This was it. I reached for the switch, my hand trembling. "Jian, if you're listening," I broadcast into the static. "Tell Rostova her weapon is armed." I flipped the activation switch for the resonance sync. A blinding, silent explosion of pure, weaponized madness erupted from my engine. The universe buckled, and for a single, infinite moment, I felt the collective, ordered mind of the Athelian hegemony break. And then, the feedback wave hit the Junker Queen, and my world dissolved into pain and light. The feedback was not a wave of energy, it was a wave of feeling. For a fraction of a second, I was connected to the Athelian network, not as an intruder, but as a part of it. I felt the serene, crystalline lattice of a billion minds. A consciousness so vast and ordered, it made the concept of a single self seem like a childish fantasy. And then I felt it shatter. It was the sound of 1,000 perfect mirrors breaking at once. It was the feeling of a placid ocean suddenly boiling. I felt the shock, the confusion, the dawning, horrific sensation of a new, unwanted emotion blooming within that ocean of logic fear. A billion minds experiencing terror for the first time. A chorus of silent, psychic screams that threatened to tear my own sanity to shreds. The pain in my head was excruciating, a physical manifestation of that psychic apocalypse. Then, just as quickly as it began, the connection severed, and I was myself again, alone in the screaming cockpit of the Junker Queen. Every alarm was blaring, a cacophony of failure. The main power grid was dead. The chaos drive was a molten lump of slag, and the only light came from the strobing red of the emergency alerts and the hellish, pulsating glow of Station Primus outside my viewport. The station was dying. Its perfect, fractal geometry was convulsing, crystalline spires cracking and collapsing into the solar corona. Its internal light, once a steady, soft white, now flickered between blood red and a nauseating violet. It was a dying leviathan, thrashing in its death throes. Worse, its defenses were firing blindly, lances of pure energy scything through the void, vaporizing asteroids and, in one horrifying instance, another Ethelian vessel that had been patrolling nearby. The network was gone, and its automated limbs were spasming in a grand, system-wide seizure. I was adrift in the middle of a war zone where all sides had gone insane. My ship was a tomb, its only momentum carrying me on a slow, graceful arc directly into the sun's gravitational pull. Rostova's 1-hour window was a distant memory. I was out of time, out of power, and out of options. My life as a scrapper had taught me one thing when the engines are dead. You focus on what still works. Life support was on its last dregs of battery power. Short-range comms, maybe. I rerouted the last of the emergency power to the transmitter, my fingers clumsy and numb. Mayday, Mayday, I rasped, the words feeling useless. This is Thorn. Operation Anvil is complete. Target neutralized. I am adrift. I didn't expect a reply. Europa was light minutes away. No one could get here in time. As I floated, waiting for the heat to overwhelm the failing insulation or the air to run out, a new variable entered the chaos. A small, wasp-like Ethelian scout ship, no bigger than the Queen, tumbled into view. It was clearly damaged. One of its crystalline wings shattered, and it moved not with the serene grace of its kind, but with the frantic, jerky motions of a panicked animal. It wasn't firing. It was just there, watching me, on a hunch. I focused the last of my concentration, trying to remember the feeling of the network, trying to listen. And I felt it. A thin, reedy signal, nothing like the overwhelming chorus from before. It was a single, terrified thought, repeating over and over the alone, I, cold, alone, my weapon, my virus of chaos and individuality, had a face. It was this small but broken ship, a single mind severed from the whole, experiencing the crushing terror of being an I for the very first time. My war had been against an idea, a faceless empire of oppressive logic. I had never considered the individuals. Were they even individuals before? Or had I just created them in the act of destroying their society? The scrapper in me screamed to ignore it. It was the enemy. But the man who had watched his parents die at the hands of a cold, unfeeling system couldn't. I channeled the last whisper of power to my external comms, not broadcasting a signal or modulating the ship's low-level magnetic field, turning the Queen herself into a crude transmitter. I didn't send words. I sent a feeling and the memory of sitting in my cockpit, watching a nebula bloom, the sense of quiet solitude that wasn't loneliness, but peace. I sent it a single, simple concept: you are not the only one. For a moment, the frantic psychic screaming from the ship quieted, replaced by a feeling of profound, aching confusion. And then it was gone, limping away into the darkness, a refugee from its own broken mind. I closed my eyes, the effort having exhausted my last reserves. The heat in the cockpit was becoming unbearable. This was it, a fitting end for a scrapper, cooked alive in the wreckage of his own making. Then, a new light cut through the red glare of my dying console. A proximity alert, powered by the last dregs of a capacitor, chirped once, then died. I forced my eyes open. A ship was decloaking just off my bow, its form angular, ugly, and beautifully, brutally human. It was a Bulldog-class cruiser, heavily scarred, its hull pock-marked from recent weapons fire. Across its prow, stenciled in stark white, was the name Vindicator. It was Captain Valerius's flagship. "Thorn, this is Valerius." A voice, rough with exhaustion, crackled over my comms. "Sit tight. We're coming to get you. Try not to melt before we get a toe clamp on you." Relief washed over me so completely it felt like a physical blow. They had come back. The sacrifice had not been total. A grappling arm extended from the Vindicator, its magnetic claws locking onto my ship's frame with a solid, reassuring thud. As they began to tow me away from the sun, I looked back at the maelstrom I had created. Athelian ships, severed from their guiding intelligence, were beginning to fight each other, their movements clumsy and inefficient, like puppets with their strings cut. Station Primus finally fractured, its core imploding in a silent, breathtaking blast of light that was consumed by the sun it had once commanded. The journey back to Europa was surreal. Captain Valerius, a grim man with the eyes of a hawk and a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite, met me in the Vindicator's medbay. He and 2 other ships were all that remained of his 10-ship squadron. "You did it," he said, his voice devoid of triumph. "Whatever the hell it is you did, it worked. The Hegemony fleet at Jupiter broke formation 30 minutes after you hit Primus. Half of them just stopped. The other half started shooting at each other. We picked off the stragglers and ran." He looked at me, his gaze heavy with the ghosts of his lost crew. Was it worth it? I didn't have an answer. I was just the delivery boy for a bomb I didn't fully understand. When we arrived back at Europa Prime, the atmosphere was not one of jubilant celebration. It was one of awed, yarified silence. The main hangar was crowded with personnel, their faces upturned to the holographic displays showing the chaos unfolding across the solar system. Rostova met me on the docking ramp. Her face was pale, her usually composed features etched with a new, profound uncertainty. "Report," was all she said. I told her everything: the psionic assault, the station's self-destruction, the scout ship. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Finally, she led me to the command center. She pointed to the main holographic map. It no longer showed just our solar system. It showed the entire Orion arm of the galaxy. A wave of corruption, a pulsating, chaotic static was spreading out from Sol at the speed of light, traveling along the Ethelians' FTL relay network. My virus wasn't contained. You didn't just give the operator a terminal illness, Thorn, Rostova said, her voice barely a whisper. You burned down the entire phone company. The Athelian Hegemony. The monolithic power that has ruled this galaxy for 200 years is gone. She turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that looked a lot like fear. The problem is, we have absolutely no idea what's going to crawl out of the ashes. The days that followed were stranger than the war that preceded them. We had won a victory so total, so absolute, that it broke the very definition of the word. There was no enemy to surrender, no treaty to sign, no territory to claim. We had decapitated a galactic empire, and now its headless body was convulsing across 1,000 star systems. Europa Prime became the unwilling center of the new universe. Fragmented signals, once blocked by the Hegemony's placid control, now flooded our comms channels. They were a chaotic chorus of new voices. We heard from species we never knew existed, races the Athelians had quarantined on their own worlds just as they had us, who were now blinking in the sudden, terrifying sunlight of freedom. We heard the sounds of brutal, opportunistic wars as long-suppressed rivalries exploded in the power vacuum. And strangest of all, we began to hear from the fallen. They were whispers at first, corrupted data packets and broken psionic echoes. They were the survivors of the Great Shattering, the individual minds left behind when the hive was destroyed. They were a species of billions born in a single, agonizing moment of terror, and they were alone. An emergency council was convened in the heart of the base, a tense, claustrophobic affair in a room of cold steel and colder realities. Rostova stood at the head of a holographic table, the map of the galaxy behind her, a pulsating, chaotic mess. Captain Valerius was there, his face a mask of grim duty, representing the military arm that now saw potential enemies behind every star. Gian, the tech priest, was practically vibrating with a mixture of scientific awe and ethical horror at what we had unleashed. And then there was me. They had given me a seat at the table, a gesture that felt as ill-fitting as the clean jumpsuit I wore. I was the anomaly, the ghost in their machine who had become the ghost in everyone's. The Cathar Dominion is already making moves to annex the Orion Spur. Valerius began to cease, his voice like grinding stone. They're a predatory species the Hegemony kept on a short leash. That leash is now gone. We need to fortify our borders, consolidate our fleet, and prepare for the wars to come. Humanity must secure its place, forcefully if necessary. Secure our place, Gian interjected, his voice sharp with disbelief. We just shattered the foundation of galactic society. We have a responsibility to what comes next. The Fallen. They're not the Hegemony. They're sentient beings, born from our actions. We should be reaching out, offering aid, not building walls. Aid, Valerius scoffed. They're broken versions of the same beings who imprisoned us for 2 centuries. For all we know, they're insane, dangerous. The first priority of this resistance, of humanity, is survival. The argument raged, a microcosm of the chaos now consuming the galaxy. Strength versus compassion, fear versus hope. Rostova listened, her face impassive, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She was a master of a 2-player chess game, and the board had just been flipped, the pieces scattered, and 1,000 new players had joined the match. She was navigating a sea of pure, unquantifiable chaos, and it was the one thing her logical mind could not compute. I remained silent, the scrapper in me listening, observing, weighing the odds. But I wasn't just a scrapper anymore. I was the man who had felt their minds break. I had heard that first as lonely scream. My silence was finally broken by a communications tech who entered the room, his face pale. "Commander," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We're receiving a direct and coherent signal. It's from their former core world. Ethel. It's broadcasting on all frequencies." He brought the signal up on the main screen. It wasn't a voice. It was a complex, layered wave of psionic and electromagnetic energy. But it was structured. It was a language of pure mathematics and raw emotion. A fusion of the old Ethelian logic and something terrifyingly new. Jian's face went slack with wonder. "It's a question," he whispered, his fingers flying across a console. "They're asking, why and who are we now?" The room fell silent. The debate was over. The abstract concept of the fallen now had a voice. A single galaxy-spanning question that cut through all the strategy and fear. Valerius saw a trap. Jian saw a cry for help. Rostova saw an unknown variable so large it could be a weapon or a salvation. I saw the terrified pilot of the scout ship, multiplied by billions. "I'll go," I said, "was heute." The words coming out before I had fully formed the thought. All eyes turned to me. "It's a suicide mission," Valerius stated flatly. "Their core world will be the most chaotic, dangerous place in the galaxy." "He's right," Rostova added, her gaze analytical. "But he's also wrong. They won't see a warship or a science vessel. They'll see a threat or an enigma. You're different." She looked at me, and for the first time, I think she truly saw me, not as a tool or a variable, but as the one person who could exist in this new reality, because I had never truly belonged to the old one. "You're the source of the chaos," she said. "You're the first ghost. If anyone can talk to them, it's you." The Junker Queen was waiting for me in the hangar. She was uglier than ever, a beautiful monstrosity of scars and salvation. Jian and his team had rebuilt the Chaos Drive, but they hadn't tried to perfect it. Instead, they had leaned into its nature. It was more powerful, but also more volatile, wired directly into my neural interface. I wouldn't just be piloting the ship anymore. I would be a part of it. We would be a single chaotic entity. As I stood on the ramp, ready to board, Rostova approached. "I spent my life fighting a logical, predictable enemy. Thorn," she said, her voice quiet. "I don't know how to lead in a universe that makes no sense." "Nobody does," I replied, pulling on my worn pilot's gloves. "You just aim and pray." She managed a small, tired smile. "Then pray this works. The future of more than just humanity might depend on what you find out there." I climbed into the cockpit, the familiar smells of home washing over me. This time, there was no grand strategy way, no squadron of soldiers sacrificing themselves to clear my path. There was only me, my broken ship, and an impossible question waiting for an answer at the heart of a fallen empire. I engaged the drive. The Junker Queen didn't just lurch this time. She screamed, tearing a ragged hole in the fabric of space. The stars outside my viewport dissolved into a smear of violent, beautiful color. I was no longer a scrapper running from his past or a reluctant weapon in someone else's war. I was a messenger, an explorer, a ghost flying into the heart of a new, chaotic dawn. I didn't know if I was flying towards absolution or annihilation, if I would find a new species to ally with or a vengeful god of my own making. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back. I was flying forward, a single, unpredictable variable in an equation I had written myself, and I was finally truly free.